we're gonna have a this is third lecture. We're gonna go back to the last lecture, and I'm just gonna do one little piece. Um, oh, this was such a good cartoon. I'll share this cartoon with anybody who wants to. I couldn't figure where to stick it in my lecture though, but I love the cartoon. It's time to reclaim American from illegal immigrants, says this, suited white guy, I guess, pointing at some people from south of the border. And here's a Native American over on the side and says, I'll help you
But
pack.
No, we're not seeing it. We're seeing your computer screen
Oh,
with an
wait,
introduction,
just a
about the
second. Why
class.
isn't this showing? Um, I don't know. Um, you are screen sharing, share. Ah, how about that?
No, all we have is energy, environment, and economics, and then the rest of your computer. Oh, now we're seeing it, but we are seeing with your
There it is.
computer screen.
Okay, you're seeing this cartoon?
Now
yes,
we are, but we have the rest of your computer screen as well. I don't know if you can get rid of that and just go to the.
Well, hang on. I don't know what I'm doing. But right here was these are the uh while that was going on, this was the what I didn't do. While evolution and all that was going on, I want to show you how oil and gas are formed. And it's let's see. Are you seeing now let me put that on. Are you seeing it now in power
yes.
uh
empowerment about oil and gas.
help? Come on, whatever you're doing, don't do it. All right.
Well, it's getting better.
Petroleum geology in 3 minutes. And my petroleum geologist friend Colin Campbell made these. The first is eh, we may think of oil being all around the world, and it's certainly many places in the world, but it's very rare that it's made in the geological past. And you have to have these particular conditions. First of all, you have to have a very warm environment. And the reason for that is you can't have, I don't know what my computer, you cannot have um, the surface water, which has oxygen because it interacts with the atmosphere, and oxygen is mostly in the atmosphere. Um, you can't get oxygen down to where you're storing organic matter. So if you have phytoplankton, little plants, either in freshwater or saltwater, and little zooplankton, damn, which are little animals that eat them, what they do is they sink because they're slightly denser than water, and they form a layer on the bottom. And if this happens, it happened 90 and 150 million years ago, mostly, were the times when the earth was warm enough. And you also had to have the formation of rifts where plates were pulled apart and find a deep trench. Now, the classic example of this is when Scotland pulled off from Norway and formed the North Sea.
Fine.
And this is where the North Sea oil, which is the only large, really large oil province that we found in almost 100 years, 80 years. And so when Scotland pulled away from Norway, it formed a deep trench, and you had, tens of millions of years of phytoplankton falling down into this trench, a subsistence trench. Maybe this is getting ready to happen where you have Lake Tanganyika Tanganyika and so forth in Africa, that they're splitting apart at that point. But it's too early to say. Then you have to have a long period of rain. In other words, you have to have climate change. And the rifts will be filled with sediments washed in from borderlands. And what you do then is you pressure cook the biology. So you have carbon chains. You and I are made of carbon chains that are hundreds or thousands of carbon molecules linked to each other. And optimal for gasoline is octane, is 8 carbons linked together. And so what you do is you pressure cook this at about the temperature of boiling water, about 100 degrees centigrade. And you do this for 100 million years, and you get these oil and gas molecules, usually on top of water. Now, most of this, maybe 99% of this, goes out to the atmosphere. Most of the oil and gas we ever had that was formed, since it's lighter than rock and lighter than, or less dense than water, it tends to move up unless caught in a trap. And so a traditional oil well is found where you have a trap. This is an anticline of impermeable, some kind of geological substrate. It could be a sandstone cap or could be a salt layer of salt, and it captures the gas will be in the top and the oil next, and underneath that water. And this is a water well over here. You know, this is a deep, it's 2 miles down approximately. That is just the right temperature for oil and gas to form. And so if it's captured in a trap, then it's captured with the gas on top, the oil underneath, and underneath that, the water. So you drill down into the oil, and the gas will push initially the oil out. And that's when you get a gusher, which is fairly rare, but it still can happen. Now, mostly the whole Earth has been seismically searched over, and we've got tens of millions of oil wells in the United States. So there's not a lot of places where there's a lot of oil left that we haven't found of this sort. But what we're doing now with fracking, and that's a different issue, is that we go down into the source rocks. The source rocks are usually underneath and more diffuse than these concentrated oil fields that has been the source of our oil and gas up till about 10 or 15 years ago. So that's just while we're doing other kinds of geology, I wanted to think for a moment about this kind of geology because it's so important for what has come subsequently. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my lecture for today, if I can find it. And here we are today. Third lecture, we want to talk about how humans came to be. And it's an extension of the last lecture, essentially on Darwin, but it is with a focus on humans. And again, let's see, the evolution of mammals, proto-hominoids, and our own species, and the beginning of increased exploitation of energy by humans, including the evolution of agriculture. Now, all evolution means is gradual change. Organic evolution is the evolution we're focusing on. That means that the change, gradual change of life. If it's a rapid change, we call it a revolution. They're just interesting that these two words that have such different meanings have the same source. I
Can you roll down?
Excuse me? Hello?
I was just asking, can you roll down the slides?
We're still on the geology of the oil field slide.
I don't, it's not on my screen. Are we having a problem here?
Yes.
Hang on. Now, all right, let me stop the share and start it again. Stop share. All right, now, let me. Mark, are you asking the same question?
I think so. I was seeing the geology of the oil field slide
Yeah.
still up while you were talking about human evolution.
Here's my third lecture. This is what I'm wanting to be looking at. And are you seeing third lecture now?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Okay, so we're on the same page. All right. And I got a little notice saying participants can now see your screen. So I guess I'm doing the right thing. All right. Let me see if I can get these people a little bit less obvious there. All right. Now here's Charles Darwin again. And this is the alternate hypothesis of where it all came from. And
Charles,
You
I'm sorry
can't-
to interrupt again, but I can't read the whole frame because it's not centered in my computer screen. The sharing is off center.
Mine's okay.
Oh, really?
We're seeing the computer, all of the stuff on your computer
Oh,
with
there
the
it is.
lecture in the
Okay.
middle.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Can you make it so we just see
are
your
we
lecture?
okay now?
Well, again, we aren't really seeing that whole first slide because you've got a lot of other stuff on there, from your computer screen.
I
All
don't
of the
understand why
the
that is.
toolbar and everything.
Right. If you delete, if there's find and replace over to the right, you can hit the X on that and take that away. Yeah, try that. No,
Me or
with your
the
mouse,
person with the
find and
problem?
replace over on the right.
Are you talking to me or the person with the problem?
Your screen
What
is.
do I do?
Okay, try find and replace. Right where you are, there's an X.
Oh yeah, find and replace. Yeah,
Okay, that
There,
helps.
now it's bigger.
really. I would
We're
never
not
have
saying-
known that. Who knew that?
But are we seeing, is everybody seeing what they think is the whole frame for that first
Yes.
slide?
It even says add the click subtitle at the bottom of the first screen.
Is that the
Okay, I'm
last
gonna
thing
go
on
to
the,
PowerPoint mode. Now, does everybody see one slide?
No,
No.
You might try hitting the two little TV boxes in the upper right corner next to the X, to the left of the X. Does that make it bigger?
yeah, hit that.
It's
Do
definitely
that?
bigger, but it's still
No, it's the other way.
Worse, much worse.
worse.
Go
All right.
back to the.
Go back.
Click it again. Click
Page
that little
thing.
box again then.
Mhm.
Red?
Don't know.
Try going to slideshow.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been doing. Okay, I'm
Well,
gonna do
there's-
it again.
Okay, in the menu at the top there where
That
it
looks
says
good.
slideshow.
What's happening?
Well,
We're
you're in edit
getting-
mode because
just
you have
start
clicked
from
to
there.
add subtitle.
Wait a
So you're
minute,
in
one
edit
person
mode.
at a time, please. I'm in what mode?
Edit mode because oh, it disappeared. You're good now, kinda better. You were in edit mode because you had a place to add a subtitle. So
Oh.
obviously we're in edit mode. But whatever you did, it's better. It's better. I like this. It's
All
not
right,
perfect, but it's better.
my screen just says third lecture.
We have something over
Yeah.
to the right with Darwin's picture, notes or something.
Yes,
Oh,
we have
next
the
slide.
next slide. So this is the current slide, and then on the right, we see the next slide.
But it's
I-
still better.
Yeah,
I
better than
have
it
no
was.
idea what's going on, and I can't get out of where I am right now. I can't even, yeah. All right, here's a picture of Darwin.
Yeah,
Are you getting this okay?
yes,
Yes.
Okay, now, important evolutionary inventions in our distant ancestors. Everybody got this?
Yes.
Now, just to sort of summarize 8 years of graduate education, postgraduate education, or whatever it was, 10 years of college, of what the important things happening, the really important things that happened to our ancestors way back is number one is the derivation of mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are the little energy factories of our cells. And so we have these little things that are kind of kidney bean shaped that apparently, and they're inside this, each cell has a whole bunch of them inside. See, there's a little sign that says mitochondria for these kidney bean looking things. And these mitochondria were apparently derived from euglenas, and they were probably ingested or eaten by early cells. And then, because it was advantageous to both of them, stayed within the cells and became what we call today mitochondria. And they were able to use oxygen, and that's the key thing. And so that brought into the bodies of larger critters, our ancestors, into all of the cells, these energy factories that were able then to take sugars and take them all the way down to what we call a terminal electron acceptor. In other words, to use oxygen rather than just the process that makes vinegar or the process that makes alcohol, which is an incomplete oxidation. This allowed complete oxidation, and there evolved all kinds of complicated biochemistry that you learn about in your biochemistry courses, starting with glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, electron transport, and the whole thing takes electrons from a reduced form and puts them into a terminal electron acceptor, oxygen normally being the case, occasionally sulfur or something else. And this made us 38 times more powerful, I think is the right number, because we could completely oxidize our food, which, for example, the critters that make apple cider or beer are not able to do. And that made us much more powerful. So the first thing, really important energy thing that happened in our long evolution was the evolution of mitochondria. The second was cephalization. So here is an annelid worm, the worm you might find in your garden, compared to a Dugesia. And what a Dugesia has is little eyes in the front of it. It's starting the process that went throughout all of evolution of cephalization, which means making a head. So you and I have all our sensory organs at the front of our body or your face. And so this allows you to detect various gradients in your environment and find food more easily. Or you can think of a dog with his nose right in front of his face. It allows him to explore the environment in which it lives much more completely. And this also began the process of a tube within a tube. And actually, it works the other way with the planarium. They have a tube that comes out of, let's call it their stomach area, the front of their ventral side. and this tube goes down and sucks up its food and it digests it and then it spits it out the same tube. And a shall we call it an improvement on this design is even with a worm, an annelid worm, it's got a tube within a tube. We're a tube within a tube. Our tube goes from our mouth to our anus, and the food is moved along this process, along this digestive tract. And so different aspects of the digestive tract can specialize for digesting the food in different ways. And that has made us more efficient in our processing of food. And a final thing that happened was the development of jaws. And here's an early fish, a lamprey eel. They swim up our rivers in Oregon, and they don't have jaws. So they attach themselves to the side of their food and then rasp a hole in the food with their tongue. And it's not a very pleasant process, I suppose. Versus this rainbow trout or a later fish that has a jaw. And jaws allow later evolved organisms to grab a hold of their food and to exploit their environment in a more efficient way. Now, which is better evolutionarily? Well, they're both here. They both work. So you can't say that it's better to have jaws than not to have jaws, but it is happened later in evolutionary time. So it's some people think from that concept it's a quote unquote improvement. I won't go there. And obviously, all these things are happening over this very long evolutionary pathways, and I don't even know where you start here. I guess you start down here somewhere and go up this way to animals and this way to fish and amphibians, and then amphibians led to birds, and somewhere around here our ancestors mammals came along, and at least they didn't put humans at the top of this, but holy mackerel, I mean, every biologist is just overwhelmed with how successful this process has been in populating the earth with all kinds of critters. And to our knowledge, this has not taken place any place else in the universe, but there is so much out there that most of us think or guess that it must have, but we have no evidence of that. Now, I want to come back to where mammals came from. 65 million years ago,
This is not good.
or 66 if you wish, the world was completely dominated in terms of larger critters with various reptiles, with dinosaurs of various sorts. And some of them running around would have had feathers, were predecessors of our birds, but it was mostly dinosaurs. Now, there were mammals at that time. Mammals had evolved and they were small. We don't know how many of them there were, but you find them often enough in the fossil record. And this is an indication of the day, perhaps the hour, perhaps the minute in which most dinosaurs went extinct. All of them except the birds. And when this meteor came in and slammed into Yucatan in Mexico. And how big was it? I think, not that big, something like 20 kilometers across or something. And we knew something like this happened, but we didn't know where. But then some people started, these are called cenotes, or they're beautiful freshwater pools. And they have this pattern, sort of circular pattern like this in Yucatan today, but they're all covered up by soil in tropical forests, and in fact, ancient civilizations are there. These over here don't seem to be quite the same thing, but this implied a impact crater, and then people went in there and examined it really carefully, and there's a signature stuff. Incidentally, the Earth probably looked something like this at the time. It was a shallow sea at the time. Here we are up here at the moment. South America's floating up towards North America. At the time, this is 65 million years ago. Boom. And it was an extraordinary event, and it left this layer of iridium that's an element. And this was apparently, the meteor was made out of iridium, and it is also associated with this little glass teardrop shaped things that were spewed out from this impact area. And the thing is that the further you get away from it, the thinner the layer is. So if you go towards where the iridium layer is thicker and thicker, in one good place where the scientists who found this out was in Haiti and Dominican Republic, where this layer of iridium was particularly thick. And that led them to figure that this was the area where the impact layer was. And so I just looked it up as I'm preparing for this lecture, and the work that they did to figure this out, where the impact crater was quite interesting. And so, boom, this is where it took place. The white indicates it was covered with water, and it made an enormous hurricane force winds and a great big tsunami, and threw out stuff all over the place. I don't know how you pronounce Chicxulub, but something like that. That's the name of the crater here. I've been there. You can't see any evidence of it. At least I couldn't. But you find a layer of dead dinosaurs around the world. Boom. They were gone. And an interesting thing is at this place, Red Wing, where several interesting geological things are found on a ranch. This guy, Robert De Palma, I don't know which of these guys he is discovered this particular place. And what it's got is a sort of a wash of stuff, including a lot of critters that came up on in this wash, and in it you find quite recognizable freshwater fish and quite recognizable saltwater fish, all mixed in together in a big pile of bones. And here you can see a heterocercal sturgeon tail, and you can see some kind of a billfish here. These are really amazing things. And what he's got here is the wash that came up from this explosion. Boom. That wash came up this seaway and then came into a freshwater environment and dumped it all in Red Wing, Montana. I'm sorry, North Dakota.
South Dakota.
And it's something that probably happened an hour or so after the impact. And probably the only critters that made it through this enormous event were what are called fossorial. That doesn't mean fossil, it just means living underground. Fossorial mammals. And this gave our class, i.e., Mammalia, an opportunity that they may not have recognized how great it was at the time, but there they are with their store of seed, because apparently there was no food at all on the earth after this impact, because there was so much debris in the sky that there was no plant life, no particular plant life growing big and green to support the dinosaurs, if any had made it through that impact. And it opened up a tremendous opportunity for our ancestors. And this is where mammals came from. Now, why exactly mammals and not dinosaurs? Because there were fossorial dinosaurs, I suppose. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it was just these accidents. I don't know if you call a meteor smashing into the earth an accident, but let's call it an accident that generated the conditions for us.
Mind if I put this in?
That's right.
So, and here we are, the line of mammals going through our various ancestors to us. And I find that all quite interesting. Now, primates, meaning us and monkeys and gorillas, were pretty successful critters. There's a lot of them. For example, here are our closest relatives, the great apes. Chimpanzee or gorilla, some argue one and some argue the other, are being our closest. And orangutans, and you notice a few common patterns amongst us. We have relatively long arms. And that's for an arboreal existence, arboreal meaning up in the trees. And it's very clear that we have relatively long arms from an arboreal existence, and you can see how we have become more. How has this happened? Through natural selection, for being more upright,
Right?
for having our spine join our skull at the bottom behind the jaw, rather coming in from the
Joints,
back.
skull.
This is the case with the chimpanzee. So you see it's like our face has rotated forward. We all have 5 fingers, as do whales and birds. So that the very common things, once it was figured out, having a pelvic girdle, we all have pelvic girdles going back even to whales. And I found out the other day that the closest relative to whales are hippos. But you get a close look at the nostrils of hippos, and you'll see how it might have worked that way. We have a girdle, a pelvic girdle, and I can't think of the name, but a top girdle for our arms. And it's just sort of variations on a theme. How closely we are to these other creatures is really quite amazing. Now, there were other accidents that contributed to who we are. And a really important one in a book I've been reading about how geology has influenced our past is this mountain range you see in northeastern Africa. Now, this is more or less the region where we have evolved in, on both sides of these mountains, as far as I can figure out. And incidentally, here you see the rift valleys forming in Africa that my produce some oil in another 100 million years or so. But anyway, here's these mountains that have emerged. I don't know what they're called in northeastern Africa. And they influence the precipitation patterns very much. Here you see on the equator, as we discussed with the Hadley cells, is where the most rain is. The rain, most water enters the atmosphere in the ocean, and some of that is brought into the basin of the Congo. And here in these mountains, we have a wet area because of what's called the orographic effect, because mountains make rain, which is obvious, and snow, precipitation, which is obvious if you live in Ashland. We're a little rain shadow here in this bowl, and we have the precipitation in the mountains around us, which you can just, well, you can see right this morning, you walk out and take a look. And there's snow up there. And so we have various winds coming into this area of Africa. And in the summer, we have monsoon winds coming in, bringing water ultimately from the ocean over here in West Africa. And then the winds blow the other direction, are drier in December. But that's what you do is you get a savanna, grassland or savanna in this region around the mountains. Now, where am I going with all of this? This is deep rainforest. This is desert, obviously. This is the sites where we found our ancestors. Olduvai Gorge is especially important, and Lucy, an especially important fossil, was found up here. But this area seems to be the origin of most of our ancestors. And the idea is that our ancestors were originally arboreal. Now, we did not evolve from gorillas. Both gorillas and ourselves evolved from some other earlier ancestor. But here is where apparently conditions were best for our ancestors to come out of the trees and start walking upright. Now, here are some skulls of our ancestors, not arranged in any particular order, but I can remember as a freshman, I took anthropology, was one of the most influential courses I took. And Dr. Ramshaw, who was a great teacher back at Colgate, and I came in one morning and he had in front of the class all these skulls, and I didn't know they were plaster casts, but I thought they were the real things as a freshman, arranged in a row in the front of my class, and just taking me through the changes that took place from our what's called proto-hominoid, meaning early or before man, to our contemporary evolution. So here's Australopithecus, and I can't read that one, and Neanderthal, and ourselves. Now, Neanderthals, I don't know, I understand, they're saying now that those of European origin have maybe 4% Neanderthal DNA in our bones. I mean, in all of our cells now, in our DNA. So we don't know that exactly, but probably several different groups of proto-hominoids came out of Africa, and they kept breeding. And here we are. Now, here's some things that seem to, now these are in order, more or less. And some things that happened was that our brow ridges became eventually less. Doesn't look like there's any diminishment from here to here. Our prognosticism, which means the degree to which our jaw sticks forward, such as a dog has a lot of prognosticism, that became less. Our zygomatic arch, that are bones that operate our jaws, became less over time, going more or less like in an S-shaped curve to ourselves today. Our face became flatter and our brain cage became much larger. There was obviously very strong natural selection for larger brains or larger brain cases, which presumably means that we're smarter. I don't know. Well, at least have more intelligence. I don't know if we're smarter. And here is another way of looking at that. And our ancestor Australopithecus of I think 200 or more million years ago was more similar to a chimpanzee. But remember, we're evolving in quite independent ways. Now, there were probably about 8 Homo something or another on the Earth at the same time a couple of million years ago. In other words, there wasn't just one line. There's all kinds of critters that were hominoid, might have been put in the genus Homo with us, meaning man. And here we are. We're somehow there was probably various interbreeding and who knows what else. And we essentially early on looked like this, as best we can tell. And look at those toes on the bottom. Big toe is really different. You want to grab onto a tree. And I think a lot about a human today playing a violin or a flute or all kinds of things, computer keyboard. We were pre-adapted for playing a flute, which is
Charles,
amazing.
can you make the slide be full screen so the illustration is bigger?
I am full screen and I don't know what's going on with anybody else. You've just got this as a little picture.
A small picture with a smaller picture of the next slide to come.
View, I think, Charlie, instead of the view that the students normally see.
There you go.
Oh, that I am so sorry. I can't even get out of where I am. Oh, there.
You can choose which view you want to show.
I can't see people's raised hands, so somebody might have been
There you go.
asking about this for some time. All right, just a minute. Your screen sharing.
That looks good.
It's better.
They're really quite remarkable pictures, aren't they? How's that?
That's good.
That's better now.
It's
Yeah,
better?
Thank you.
Okay.
Would think so.
Now, we were originally, presumably, like a chimpanzee, highly pigmented. And, there's been so damn much crap going on in human history about skin color. But skin color is just an adaptation to the environments in which we were found. So those of our ancestors that moved out of Africa in several ways and covered their skins with went where it was cold part of the year and covered their skins with animal skins. If you were heavily pigmented, which is a good thing to protect you from cancer,
They don't know what to ask.
you would you would get less vitamin D because your skin turns sunlight into vitamin D. Somebody please turn off your microphone unless you need to communicate with me, in which case yell. And so if you had a darker skin, you were more likely in a northern climate with your skin covered with animal skins to get rickets, which is a very bad thing for a hunter-gatherer to have. So there was an evolution towards a lighter skin color, just like there's natural selection for other things. And they say young people today who spend so much more time indoors are more likely to have rickets. There's a new epidemic of rickets among young Americans because they're not getting enough sunlight. Now, they found this amazing set of footprints in Tanzania from 3.5 million years ago. And they're footprints of humans, of a larger one and a smaller one and a whole bunch of them.
Next
with
slide.
giraffes and elephants and birds. And here they are, and some anthropologists trying to figure them out today.
We're not seeing
You have to chip away. You see the surface layers to get to them. So they were
Can you
laid
advance the
down
slide,
in
please?
volcanic mud.
Charles, next slide, please.
Hello?
we're not
Advance the slide to the footprints, please.
You can't see the
No.
slides?
Nope.
We're still looking at the heads.
What?
There
Okay,
they are.
Good.
still in edit mode.
Got the
Oh,
footprints.
wait a minute. Go in edit mode.
You still are in edit mode, not in slideshow mode. So,
Yeah.
I don't think you want to be.
How about that?
That's the footprints.
All right. Have you seen these? Are we on the same page?
we're in the same, but you're still in edit mode and not
Yes.
full screen, but you're showing us all the slides on the left side.
What do I do?
I think somebody can help you after you're done with this. Someone had something in a chat that was a suggestion, which makes me think they know what they're talking about. So maybe after you're done with the lecture, you can look at the chat and someone could help you with that.
Okay. You see a giraffe now?
No,
Somebody does not see a giraffe?
Nope.
No.
no,
We're seeing footprints.
No.
The world.
Can you go up one slide?
There's giraffe.
yes.
Maybe I'll just stay in this mode. All right. Everybody sees a giraffe?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
And 3 of our ancestors walking along in front of the giraffes and elephants.
I
Yeah.
recognize my uncle.
Okay, good. I'll tell you, the uncle of all of us, maybe. And you see some guinea hens, they're leaving their track. All of this is in the same scene. Now, we don't know if they were made contemporaneously. This was one interpretation, which I liked it. 2 of our ancestors on a date. Might have been.
Notice that they have no body shame.
Yeah.
Something we into.
Now, humans evolved in special ways, and biologists in general love this guy, Gary Larson. And so the first is the importance of intelligence. And the idea is that here's a couple of guys who maybe are a little less likely to pass their genes on because they haven't quite figured out the situation. You say, we got him now, thinking, not recognizing that's the leg of the mother. And a really, really important thing about humans is that they're social animals. Most animals are not especially social there's just all kinds of divisions. Some, like ants, are very, very social, and humans and hominoids in general are very social. And the concept, evolutionary concept, is that there's a great deal to be gained by doing things together. Sailfish, for example, hunt together, and or whales. I've seen it. I saw it last summer. I saw these whales collect a ball of herring in what's called a bubble shield. They'll release bubbles in the water, and these enormous whales come up through the water, and working together, they corral the herring and catch many more fish than is otherwise the case. So all kinds of creatures are social creatures, and that evolved into many complex things, but including love, I suppose, and liking and friendship, and all kinds of things we view very positively in our life. Okay, next. Language. I love these cartoons. Look how thick it's a. Dang, I never can pronounce those things. So language was important for natural selection and mathematics. In writing, this guy is suggesting that they could tally sheet with writing instead of making these big stone structures like Stonehenge. I don't know if you enjoy these jokes as much as I do, but anyway, okay, energy. Energy is not just important now. Energy's always been important. Now, I'm not saying water, soil, all these other things are important too, but energy is critical to all of them. We were hunter-gatherers for 1,000 times longer than we were farmers. And let's take a look at contemporary hunter-gatherers. They have been especially well studied. The Kum, that Kum means a click that they use in their language, which they use very readily, but I cannot. Here they are. This is a woman carrying a child and a couple of men carrying their bows. If you've ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, if you haven't seen that movie, you should see it. And it's a marvelous movie about these people who, to me, are really beautiful human beings and beautiful examples of what our ancestors were probably like. It's a very funny movie also, and pretty much treats them very respectfully, I think. But they may not think that. We should ask them. They live in Southwest Africa around a series of water holes. And I read this paper by Richard Lee when I was in graduate school, and I think it influenced me a whole lot. And there's a series of water holes, and they move from water hole to water hole. And the reason they'd go from there is their main food source was mongongo nuts, or thought to be mongongo nuts. And if you move to a new water hole, then you get the nuts. The trees are distributed around the whole environment there, mongongo trees. And they would collect the nuts right near camp immediately, and then they'd go a little further and a little further and a little further, up to 10 miles, in other words, 5 miles out and 5 miles back, collecting mongongo nuts, the women and children. And then they'd have to take a 2-day trip so they could get a lot more, they'd be able to exploit a larger area, that's the dotted lines, away from their water hole. But in so doing, they would have a much larger cost. This may have been when I began to think about energy return on investment. In other words, the energy return on investment is much higher here than it is here, because you have to pay eating mongongo nuts for your trip. And the idea was that their cultural adaptation was very much determined by their energy cost and energy gain of exploiting the resources about them. Now, this is what I was reading in the 1960s in graduate school, and it was a marvelous study. And then other anthropologists, Lee, Rappaport, White, Thomas, Vida, they all, I went and visited some of these people just to learn about and talk with them about their ideas. And hunting gave some needed and appreciated protein, but it was thought that the hunting was a luxury. But I had my last special undergraduate was Matt Glaub in Syracuse, and he came to me with this idea, and we eventually published it in the journal Human Ecology. And this was based on Matt's ideas. We did an EROI of the coon hunting kudu. And this was, one thing I forgot to say, from mongongo nuts, Richard Lee estimated that they got back 10 calories for 1 calorie invested, and he called it the original affluent society. Their affluence was leisure, and they spent a lot of time with their children and with socializing and telling stories, and seemed to be very, very happy people, as you will see in this movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy. And so,
Charles, I think you're muted.
What?
Matt and
I
I
can hear him.
calculated the energy return on investment for persistence hunting. What they do is a human cannot catch a kudu, but if they go out in the middle of the day and they have 2 or 3 young, good runners and 1 or 2 old guys who are really good trackers, because you got to track the specific animal. You find a kudu or antelope, you chase him away, the kudu runs away, and he'll go and find a bush, maybe a mile away or 2 miles away. And if you can keep on him, if you can track him for 3 or 4 different times, you can wear him out because he gets too hot. Running generates too much heat. And humans being vertical and possibly being bald so they can give off heat, can keep after the kudu, and eventually he'll overheat and simply cannot run, and the person can run up and shoot him with a bow and arrow or spear him. And it is thought this idea of persistence hunting, which will take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, this idea of persistence hunting was how humans were able to be good hunters, even though the animals they were hunting were much faster than them. They're not faster than humans over the long course, especially in the heat of the day. So, a lot more to that story, but that's a little bit that we contributed. I thought was pretty, and the EROI was pretty bloody high. Now, one of the things is if you look at the running or walking energy use, this is a log scale, versus the body mass versus other similar sized relatives of ours, humans bipedal walking, the way we walk is much more efficient. It uses much less energy, 1/5 the energy per kilometer. So apparently when we came out of the trees and started walking, there was very strong selection to be the shape that we are. And then humans walked to all distant places of the earth. How many years ago they came out of Africa several times? Incidentally, people that are in South Africa and in West Africa are just as different from our ancestors as we are, because they've had as much evolutionary time to diverge. And the people came into the Americas, apparently across the Bering's Bridge, and which was dry when the sea was lower, when the world was glaciated, and apparently spread very quickly throughout all of the Americas. And they began to leave their cultural artifacts. Here's a depiction in Croatia of a Neanderthal family. Looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? We had a significant environmental impact. It is thought that, 10,000, 12,000 years ago, there were two species of elephants right here in Oregon. And was it climate change or was it humans that brought this about? And that's still debated. A guy named Martin has done some studies that pretty sure it's humans. So we've had a lot of environmental impact. It's not just modern humans. Now, energy is also important in ways you may not think about. And here's a cartoon. There go the Wilson. Seems like everyone's evolving like us. And it was a cultural evolution. Fire is obviously energy. The importance of fire is it allowed us to eat plants more readily, more plants, because plants have cell walls. That's what animals don't have, cell walls. Plants do. They're hard for us to digest unless you cook them first. So that greatly expanded the food range for us. And you may not think of a spear or a knife blade as an energy tool, but it is. It's a force concentrating device. If you're trying to penetrate the hide of a big beast with just your fist or even a stick, you can't do it. But if you concentrate the energy onto a point, obviously you can do it. So all of these are energy technologies of our ancestors. Herding then is obviously energy technology. You're keeping the animals you eat close at hand. Here's where different animals that we use came from in the world. A lot of them from Asia: pig, goose, dog, rooster, buffalo, all of these, horses and oxen, meaning cow, and goat and so forth from Central Asia here. And culture was important in many things, including figuring out how to plant. Probably people just watched what grew around their kitchen midden. And here's the different places that agriculture first took place independently. I mean, certainly the Mesoamericans, which were evolving a maize culture at the same time as the Middle East, was doing that with wheat. I don't know, but in Southeast Asia was doing with rice. I don't know why it happened about the same time. And what humans did was genetically engineer what we have now. This was the original corn here, pretty small. And that's what our ancestors genetically engineered, just by keeping the biggest product and planting the largest seeds or largest group of seeds. And this generated a series of different problems. This is Euphesius, mentioned in the Bible, 7th century BC. The Aegean Sea was right here, and then all this area has been filled in with silt, eroding from the agricultural lands. Here's how early agriculture started was not continuous cultivation, but shifting cultivation. I took these pictures myself in the Bolivian Amazon. And here's an area that's just been cleared and burned. Here's an area that might have been burned a year ago. And in the middle of all this stuff, the people plant their cultivars. And they'll grow their plants for 2 or 3 years and then abandon the land because the nutrients will have been moved out, will have been moved into the plants and lost from the soil. Where's this picture? Oh, well, never mind. I'm missing a picture. But another way of maintaining nutrients, other than shifting cultivation, is paddy rice, where people return their own feces to these areas to maintain the nutrients, and they very carefully regulate the water to maintain the nutrients. And here's a little dam between 2 rice fields with soybeans planted down the edge. Every square inch would be used in China. And this is a very careful working of engineering of the landscapes. And I'm going to, well, here's just some ancient civilizations growing up around Africa. I mean, around agriculture. And the development of agriculture allowed the development of cities, such as ancient Ur, from which we get the word urban. This wasn't even understood to be anything until people started to dig out the silt and the dust, and they found enormous cities here in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates. And huge, huge cities were extant in Guatemala and southern Mexico. And they just, poof, disappeared. They didn't know that, they thought what was hills. They didn't realize were ancient cities. In the Amazon now, we also find ancient cities like this. So cultural evolution was important in many different ways, metallurgy, and I'm not going to get into detail there because I want to have time. But I want to end with asking just a few things. Incidentally, human populations went up and down and up and down and up and down, not just up. Very complicated human history. Now, my last point, is natural selection operating in humans at this time? Think about it with medicine, vaccinations, and public health. Public health is vastly more important than medicine in keep making us healthy. My God, all the diseases I did not have because I had vaccination as a child. Rubella, polio, probably 8 diseases that I would have had if it weren't for the vaccinations. But does that mean that now I have no children, but if I had children, would they be less fit? How about your children? Are they less fit because we've defeated the diseases? Think about it. We have lower requirement for physical strength and dexterity. Now, of course, natural selection is still operating because we don't all live to reproductive age. So there's something happening. And there's another thing happening. Our genes are getting all mixed. In my high school, it was big news when Alice Amonte married Jack Ryan. My God, an Italian, beautiful Italian lady marrying a handsome Irish fellow. But that was big news in my high school. And now genes are flowing all around the world with jet plane travel. And our own species and their pathogens are all mixing more than ever. Who or what will determine the gene frequency ratios in the future? Well, there's an answer to that. Same as always, the environment, whatever that will be. Okay, I'm going to leave it here and open for questions. And I'm sorry I don't know how to make I never had this problem in 3 years of teaching this course. Stop the share and okay, hi. 6963660. Your hand
That's
is up.
Meg. I'm sorry I didn't change it. It's me.
I don't
Meg.
care.
Okay. Well, I had an initial question, but then I have a comment. So I'm going to
Okay,
start.
would you be happy to, if we could see your face?
Oh, sure.
I
Sorry.
kind of like that.
There I am. Anyway, the comment right now is in the book Homo sapiens and other classes. They talk about cooking as completely, and you kind of touched on this, but as central to the evolution of our brains because of the greater access to proteins. That when you're not
Protein?
eating proteins from food, so like you can more easily digest food and like animal protein, also plants, etc. So that cooking happened, I've just looked it up, about 780,000 years ago. And so they pinpoint that as being extremely crucial. So just for civilization to develop. So that's one point. But my original thing was,
Whoa. Let me
Okay,
take
sure.
this for a second. Well, there's protein in plants.
Yes.
And for example, in England, in Europe, in let's say 500 years ago, a really important thing that happened was they brought in beans from the Americas, I think. And beans, when you eat them raw, you can't digest the plant cell walls very easily. So if you cook beans, it became a cheap source of protein that allowed people need some minimum amount of protein. It doesn't have to be animal protein, but it's got to be protein. And protein means nitrogen. It's a nitrogen rich food. And nitrogen, although 80% of the air around us is nitrogen, it's inaccessible because it's N2, two nitrogen molecules are held together very tightly by what's called their triple bonds. So bringing in beans and legumes in general, peas and so forth, into our diet greatly increased our proteins, allowed for a much better development of our bodies entirely. Now, our brains run off of sugars, which is a carbohydrate, that's the fuel, but they need the proteins to develop. That is especially important when you're developing, up until age 18 or whatever. So, okay, I don't know if that's an answer to your first question. It's my comment on your first question. Yes, I think cooking is a very important cultural thing that gave humans access to a lot more food. But this is a point I skipped over. It's at the end of my lecture. My lectures are too long. We didn't improve the nutrition of humans with agriculture and with food. And in fact, an anthropologist named Larry Angel did this really incredible study of people at sort of where Greece and Turkey come together, Anatolia. And he dug up cemeteries of different ages. And he found that the stature of people 10,000 years ago that lived there was as great as people to get today, but they diminished during the intervening period during intensely agricultural areas. So the agriculture made more food but it was absorbed by more people. So the per capita diet did not improve until the industrialization of agriculture gave us another pulse.
Yeah,
So
it's just that what I learned was previously was that cooking was instrumental in making the energy available to humans, and they had a much greater ability to absorb the energy through the mechanisms you talked about, and helped to it's associated with the great increase in the brain. So that's
yeah, the brain is very expensive in
Yeah.
terms of energy to maintain. Yes,
Mhm.
all of that is correct, except for one little addition. And if you want the Larry Angel paper, then write me. I'll try to find the reference because it's amazing.
Mhm.
Is that if you have population growth, you can just absorb it.
Yeah. But my very first question was, in the great catastrophe with the meteorite 66 million years ago, what happened to sea life? Because was it
Oh,
only
80% went extinct.
80%? And was it only very deep sea life that like those very deep in the water that maybe weren't affected by the boiling of the atmosphere or the boiling of the surface water?
I don't know because they're dependent upon stuff filtering down. Even little things called coccolithophores, 80% of the species went extinct. Um, so just some of them, we don't know. I guess I can't answer that. But the sea was enormously impacted and all kinds of, for example, dinosaur, sea-going ichthyosaurs and so forth went extinct.
And which survived?
In the
Are
sea?
any
Well,
broad categories of creatures that survive?
I don't know, tuna fish. What? Uh, herring, I don't know, whatever we got now. Or
Thank you.
their ancestors.
Oh, and
Well, there are people who could answer your question very well, but I'm not one of them.
right. And I put in the chat that those mountains are called the Abyssinian or Ethiopian highlands.
Oh,
So,
okay.
thank you.
Mark.
Yes, thanks. I have a comment about the earlier discussion on the decline of the dinosaurs and the emergence of mammals. And I developed a theory that I wrote an essay on called Without Chicxulub, There Would Be No God.
No God.
No God. Yep. As
Dinosaurs didn't have gods?
well, do you think? Let's think about the dinosaur mind. Did they perceive of a concept of God or a supreme being?
You don't know.
Probably not.
I don't know, but my dog probably thinks I'm God,
That's
and
right.
I don't know if you're
See,
a lizard.
the dog is already a highly evolved mammal. So let me
But
get
how
back to
about
my
a highly
point.
evolved lizard?
Well, I mean, what was her Tyrannosaurus Rex brain was about the size of a walnut, I understand. So let me finish with my point, and then we can take up the discussion. So my point is that once the mammals started to evolve from the little ground-dwelling ones, eventually humans evolved, and then our mind evolved, and our mind with our intellect was capable of conceptualizing with abstract thought, and we invented the concept of God. And that would have been thousands of years ago, not millions of years ago. Now, if the Chicxulub impact had not happened at the time that it did when there was ancestral mammals around, then there's a good chance that the human mind and the human body, Homo sapiens as we know it, would not have evolved if there was an impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So if humans had not evolved, there would be no God, because it takes a human mind to have the perception of an abstract thought like there is a God out there. So in the absence of humans, and we can look anywhere in the world where there's no humans, look around and check, is there any other living organism here that perceives that there's a God? And I think that there isn't. So that's why I say, in the absence of the Chicxulub crater, there would be no God. because there's no mind that can conceive of it.
I agree with you 100%, but if we were having this discussion with the people who believe in God today,
Yes,
that you would get a different response than you get
that's
from
right.
me.
But that's because they believe in their own intellect. If our human intellect did not exist, because humans never evolved, there would have been no living organism around to generate the idea that there is the supreme being and supreme creator over everything. And that'd be it.
You won't have any argument from me.
Yeah. So that's what I say. We owe our thanks to the Chicxulub for us to be able to conceptualize that there's a God.
Could I jump in just for a minute?
Sure.
There's an incredible book called An Immense World by Ed Yong, which talks about the perceptions of animals. It blew my mind. Honestly, it blew my mind because I'm thinking in a human conceptual world, and I agree with you. Things wouldn't be conceptualized in the same way, but the experiences that we can postulate about animals are incredible and would possibly be akin to nirvana experiences in some cases. So just a point.
Yes. And the experts that I have studied have suggested that we don't know the course of evolution in the absence of the Chicxulub impact and what kind of organisms would have evolved. But at that point, the mammals were only what we could consider to be rodent shrew type creatures living in the ground. So if mammals, some more sophisticated mammal evolved, it may or may not have had an intellect that could perceive these things. So even a dog at this point with its advanced mammalian brain might be able to conceive of God. We don't know because we can't read the dog minds.
Well, the elephants have a brain 5 times bigger than ours. Who knows what they think?
Yeah. But they don't seem to worship any idols.
Karen, you are very expressive. So you can turn on your microphone and you can be expressive to us.
I'm sorry. It's simply that, it is a fascinating discussion, but it is not relevant to this course. Somebody should probably offer a course that it would be relevant to. It would be fascinating. But we could spend the rest of, until the sun gets large enough to fill the Earth's orbit and still get absolutely nowhere with the subject matter of this course. I'm sorry, I will shut up now.
Well, I would counter that with we're in the discussion period after your lecture, and I find it immensely intriguing, and we never know where one comment or discernment is what that tangent's gonna do, and it's enlightened me greatly, and we're still talking about human beings and energy and the environment. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
John.
I think I'm live. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It seems to me that when you focus on the Chicxulub impact, that I think the common conception is that it just swept around the earth and wiped everything out instantaneously or relatively quickly. But I don't know how long they estimate that the sun was blocked out by all the debris in the
years, 2, 3.
Many years, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But no sunlight was coming down to
no food, no energy, no energy we can use.
That affects the waters, it affects the land, it affects everything. If there's no plant life,
it's blocked photosynthesis was the issue.
Yeah, it blocks photosynthesis. Exactly. That's the point. And you wonder how even the little shrew-like creatures and so on were surviving. I'm wondering if because of all the debris around that. I just taught a course on fungi, and I'm pretty interested in the fungal world. And I'm wondering if, since the fungi don't depend on photosynthesis, whether they found enough energy and decaying material to thrive.
Well, there must have been a lot of carcasses.
Even those shrew creatures just survive as long as they did in the absence of photosynthesis on the planet by eating fungi. That's just an idea.
Yes.
Truffles.
Certainly.
Goodies.
I would think so.
So fungi don't require any light?
No, they live underground. Mostly they living underground. they require food, but they can get food by either decomposing other things, or they can get food by collaborating with trees and in those mycorrhizal associations, and the trees and the plants will supply the energy to the fungus, and the fungus supplies nutrients and nitrogen and water to the fungi.
I
So
guess there was a lot with all that decaying matter.
there's plenty to decay at that after that impact, I'm sure.
Well, in the last lecture, I recommended this book, Dinosaurs at the Dinner Party. If we were having this discussion only 200 years prior, or even 150 years prior, it wouldn't be anything like what we're talking about now. It would all go back to, the Bible when 8,000 years ago and so forth and so on. It would, and I'm happy to have somebody represent that point of view here if you want to, but I think most people, most well-educated people today would just not give that as an answer. But it's an amazing transition in the human mind in 150 years, thanks to Charles Darwin and other scientists. All the data seems to be consistent with this perspective, and we just add in more and more details as I try to represent in my lectures. But my perspective is so much of all of this is based on energy and all of these things contributing to technologies that allow one group of organisms to have an advantage over others.
I have one. Okay.
Yeah, who is it?
Mr. Beto. Whatever that is. Mute, please.
No, whoever it is, go ahead. Who's speaking?
No one.
Coming from Anthony, but I think he doesn't have a question. I think it's background noise.
Yeah, he didn't raise his hand.
Okay. Well, I would like a few more hand raisers, please.
I need to sign off. Goodbye at 12:30. Thank you all.
Okay.
Charlie.
Oh, Carol.
Well, just kind of a comment. You were talking about all this return on investment and the tribe looking for the nuts. And it just makes me think about how we're at this point where we're using so much energy for things like cryptocurrencies to store energy for that, and goods and services where we seem to have gone kind of haywire on our returns of energy for what we're getting out of it. And then you come up to, philosophical and cultural questions about what we're doing as a species. Just a comment.
Just like going to
to
the
me,
moon
what's
and
really
Mars.
interesting is we're putting so much energy into putting human beings out of work.
Yeah, all of it. It just seems to be we're hitting a dead end. I don't know. Somebody else had a
that's
comment?
that's part and parcel of my last question. What are we going to be selected for in the future? Maybe for having dumb minds and lying on couches and being amused by something for a little while. I don't know. No, I'm pretty
But it's
cynical
accelerating
about-
to such a degree that don't even have the capacity yet to kind of know what we're doing to ourselves. I mean, whether we'll be able to outrun this or pause to think about the return on energy and I don't know. It's just a comment.
Well, I'm going to tell you where I sit, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in this course, Carol. Where I sit, I get probably daily emails of some kind or another about either how we're destroying the world or human culture in a new and different way, on the one hand, and another one is how some marvelous technology, including AI, is going to come along and bail us out. So Take your pick. I get it. I get both perspectives daily, and I don't know. I'm unable to. I'm glad I was born in 1943. Quite frankly, it was an interesting time to pass my time on Earth. I don't think it would be. Who knows what the next 80 years are going to be like? Um, I I don't think it's likely to be as pleasant and interesting a life as I've had. And for one thing, I captured the last of the really wild nature and was able to enjoy it, to put my canoe into places where you'd see no humans for a week and so forth. So I'm going to miss that, I think. And I think young people are going to miss that. I'm sorry. Okay, unless there's any other questions, I'll see you in a week. And I'm going to trying to get all the slideshows. You should have access to the lectures, and I'm trying to get the slideshows onto this site that Eric's maintaining and so forth. So I'll spend a little more time on that this week.
Charles, could you please share the title or author of the book you mentioned that you said you're currently reading when you talked about origins in Africa?
Yes, and that was one of the things I was supposed to do before I started this class, and I forgot.
Maybe put that in your email for next week.
Well, can you, whoever it is, can you email me chall@esf.edu and say
Sure.
what's the name of your book that
Sure.
with Africa?
Sure.
Okay, and then I'll share it with everybody. But you
Great.
got to nudge me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Delight. You're good. A good class.